This is the Friday Rugby Preview on Borders Rugby Radio with Stuart Cameron.
Hello and welcome to the Friday Rugby Preview programme, taking a look at tomorrow's games in the Borders. I'm Stuart Cameron, and with me is Dale Clancy, and let's begin with the Super 6, where tonight Southern Knights have a home game against Heriots at the Green Yards. Now, plenty of enforced changes to the squad. It's not been a great season for them in terms of injuries.
Yeah, they've had a difficult campaign. They had a difficult sprint campaign where I think they have been feeling the effects of the mass exodus after the kind of Rob Christie era. They lost a lot of players up to the capital city, like the Heriots, and are one of the teams that have benefited from the players going up to play the rugby in the capital. So it's been a bit of a transition for the Southern Knights, and they've been unlucky with injuries as well. Harry Borthwick getting injured. Aidan Cross also was injured recently as well, and
good to see him back.
Yeah, and good to see him back in the squad because he's one of him and Sam Derrick are two of the players that really stood out in that one for Melrose, and it's good to see them get a shot. So it's going to take a little bit of time for the players to really gel and get used to playing at that high level, but they do have players like Charlie Shield coming in at scrum half, which hopefully gives them a little bit more of an experienced head at 9 to get the best out of these young players. But it's a difficult one. But they're yet to win at home. They've suffered a couple of heavy defeats, but they've won one on the road against Stirling Wolves. So they'll be hoping to try and get a win under the belt against a Heriots team who kind of flip flop between being really good and being quite error strewn as well.
Well, no rugby in Scotland last weekend for obvious reasons, so a little bit of a disruption to proceedings, but we're back with a full programme this weekend and a chance for clubs to pay tribute to Her Majesty the Queen in their own way.
Yeah, I think that there was obviously a little bit of a traditional approach to what has turned out to be a bit of a modern issue. When Elizabeth took the throne all those years ago, we didn't have the international tournaments and the travel that we do today, and I think perhaps some sports opted to take a week off. Other sports opted to pay their respects by going forward. I think there'd be nothing better than to see the full stadiums, fall silent for a minute and show their respects that way. But that was going to be the protocol anyway. It was meant to be a complete wipeout of all sport, but it's different times and it gives the clubs a chance. Even clubs like Southern Knights maybe got a chance to kind of bring some bodies back to play some rugby this weekend, but it'll give the clubs a chance to pay respects in their own way.
We've been hearing a few positive comments coming from certain quarters that we may well be seeing at long last the long-promised cross-border competition soon involving Welsh clubs. Have you heard anything at all?
I've heard nothing.
Nothing at all?
Just then, that's the first I've heard.
So we're not going to get anything out of you?
No, you're going to get nothing out of me, but I think it's a promising step. It is something that I think is needed because the Super 6, as much as, I'm a big advocate for it, I think the step up in quality is really good. You've been able to get all the best players in a smaller pool of clubs, which I think is really important. We do cry about the level of the Scotland under-20s, but it's got to come in time. They've got to be playing at a better level. But I feel that the Super 6 in itself might stagnate slightly because of the lack of attractive fixtures. Playing each of the clubs half a dozen times is not attractive to a fan base. When you've got trips away, when you've got good quality opposition coming up, I think that adds to the spectacle that could be the Super 6. So if that's something that is going to happen in the near future, then I certainly welcome it.
When Super 6 first started, they were all very close games. Now, this season, there's been a bit of a divide, isn't there? We've seen Ayrshire Bulls, we've seen Watsonians get big wins over the likes of Boroughmuir Bears, 40-odd points on them. And then Stirling Wolves and obviously Southern Knights down towards the bottom area. And all this talk of Super 8s and Super 10s in the future, well, at the moment, it looks like a Super 4.
The two teams certainly, Southern Knights and Stirling Wolves, have found it difficult this campaign. I think initially when it did set off, before COVID as well, they spread the talent pool pretty thin in terms of a lot of clubs got a fair share of really good players. Melrose at the time, the players moving from Melrose to Southern Knights, they almost had limited competition because of the prestige that Melrose had in their old identity as an amateur club. Southern Knights were looking to carry that through, and I think after COVID and when times move on and the experienced players move, this is a new breed coming through, and I think that a lot of clubs like Ayrshire Bulls, they can attract a really good pool of players because of their location as well, they've got no competition really. Stirling Wolves should almost be the same, but the three Edinburgh clubs are kind of cutting each other's throat. But Watsonians seem to have a great buy-in. But you do lose the attraction, like London Scottish. I know we're mooted for a while. We're going to perhaps be one of the teams, and perhaps a professionally aligned team as well. But I think the London Scottish ship's sailed. But the games are starting to get a little bit wider. You can see that now the Bulls and you would say Watsonians are the two teams that are going to be in the top two. Then you've got Heriots and Boroughmuir, and then you would say Wolves and Southern Knights will probably be at the bottom. But it's starting to take shape, I think, as to what the club's focuses have been in this short time.
OK, let's have a few words from the head coach, Bruce Rutherford.
We have a few players returned back from injury, namely Paddy Harrison, Robbie Chalmers in the centre. Corey Winters comes in, makes his starting debut on the left wing. Edinburgh pro players Charlie Shield, Jamie Jack and Luan De Bruin come in as Edinburgh through the pro draft, which will be welcome additions to the squad. And we're in confident mood going into tomorrow night. We know Heriots will be another challenge for us, but we feel we've had another good week's training and look forward to the challenge ahead.
Bruce Rutherford, and the game kicks off at 7:45 tonight down at the Greenyards. It's Southern Knights against Heriots. Well, our commentary match last week was supposed to be Selkirk versus Jed Forest, and it should have been you commentating. Obviously, that game was postponed and will now take place on November the 19th during the autumn test window, along with the other Premiership matches. So tomorrow, our commentary match will be National 1 encounter between Gala and Aberdeen Grammar, who were relegated from the Premiership last season and have started the season with a 2014 loss at Kelso. So another trip into the borders for them tomorrow.
Yeah, Aberdeen Grammar, I think, are an interesting team because they were well out of their depth in the Premiership last campaign, and they've had to go through a lot of changes of personnel, and they're perhaps an area of the country that often gets neglected. They're flying the flag for the kind of the Caledonian region, so they'll be wanting to come down and put in a performance. But it's a good start for Kelso, because to play a team coming down from the Premiership, you don't really know what they're going to be like. Have they lost a lot of players? Have people moved on? Have they brought a lot of players in? Because a lot of the time they're reliant on the university as well to bring some players in. So, it's a difficult game for both those teams, because Gala have really, really high hopes of what they're going to do this season. But I'm sure Aberdeen Grammar will be wanting to try and get a win on the board and get things moving from there.
Well, let's hear from head coach of Gala, Stuart Johnson.
Looking forward to Aberdeen coming down to Netherdale on Saturday. They'll be looking to get their first win of the season after an opening day defeat to Kelso. And also we're looking to continue that start that we had with a bonus point win against Watsonians. Team-wise, it's a very settled starting team from that Watsonians fixture, with the added benefit of Ewan Dodds, Stevie Cairns and Andrew Mitchell all coming back into the mix on the bench.
So, Aberdeen yet to play at home, Gala's second home match.
Yeah, that's kind of what you would want to start a campaign, especially after falling just short last year. You would want two home matches to try and get some momentum and some confidence, and having the likes of Ewan Dodds coming back in the squad is also another confidence boost. He's a player with masses of experience and masses of ability, and I think it's nice to see him coming back to Netherdale. He's obviously been away at Watsonians and whatnot, but it's nice to see him come back to his home club and really contribute. And he knows that he's probably not going to be a starter every single week, but he brings a lot of experience, and I think that's what this young team need. They need people like that, like Jono, the coach. He's a relatively young coach. He's got aspirations of being successful as a coach as well, and wanting to put a stamp down. So they've got that good nucleus of experienced players, and especially experienced players from the borders. So difficult game for them, but I think Gala will be certainly hoping they can get another win.
And Gala really are targeting this promotion, there's no question about it. But it's not going to be handed to them on a plate. There's a lot of hard work to be done. Yeah,
especially because most of our border clubs seem to have been stuck in that league. You've got Melrose and Kelso in there as well, and it's always difficult when it comes down to those games. Those are sometimes the games that dictate who goes up and who goes down from that league, not just the borders clubs, because teams end up cutting each other's throat, as we've known to see over the last few years with borders clubs. But Gala, they've turned a corner, and they're a team that I've said it time and time again. They're a team that when I first started doing this, I didn't really enjoy watching them because I thought they lacked a bit of direction after George Graham, but they do have an identity now, along with Kelso. And Melrose are now finding them in a new guise.
Well, Robin Purdy and Sam Matthews will be our commentary team for that one. Let's turn to the Premiership then, and Selkirk, a win and a draw for them, and a tricky trek to Stony Hill to face Musselburgh. Let's hear what head coach of Selkirk, Scott White, had to say.
Boys are looking forward to it. I mean, you look at Musselburgh's results over the first 2 weeks, and you've got to
appreciate who they've played. You know, they've played Curry and Mar, and yes, they're sitting with 2 from 2, but I don't think you can read too much into that given, you know, how good Curry and Mar were last year. So, you know, they're back at home as well. They'll be desperate to get their campaign up and running. So we appreciate how hard it's going to be. There'll be a slightly different kind of squad this week for ourselves as well. Just James Bett's getting married this weekend, so wish him all the best on his big wedding day on Saturday, and there'll be a few players missing, but you know, we can't underestimate what Musselburgh bring. They've scored a lot of points the first 2 weeks, so you know, it's up to us going up there, playing our own game plan and not getting pulled into kind of any of the nitty gritty stuff. Hoping to come away from Musselburgh with some points.
OK, that's the view of Scott White. A third game unbeaten and the confidence will certainly grow.
Yeah, and I think after last season, I did say that, you know, if the results don't go their way, that Scott White would be under a lot of scrutiny, and he's started very, very well with Selkirk. I've been really impressed because those 2 games that you start with, Hawick, who, you know, everybody had high aspirations for this season. You start with a draw away from home, and then you play Hawks, who are a very physical team, and they managed to beat them in a tight game, but they're the tight games that they lost last year. I think if they can get another result, it'll be great for their confidence. You just wonder how much impact the James Bett wedding will have. Obviously, we hope he has a cracking day, but it'll be better if you know, his teammates can get the win on the road.
So that's Selkirk at Musselburgh. Jed Forrest, now they're at home to Glasgow Hawks this week, and they'll certainly be looking for points. Here's head coach Andrew Brown.
The next 2 weeks for us are fairly important to get results. I feel that we were quite unlucky against Hawick to get nothing from the game, given that we held them 2-0 in the second half. Mistakes cost us dearly. We need to iron out those mistakes. Training's going well, and I feel that we're heading in the right direction. I don't think we're too far away from getting the result that we want. Team news wise, Harry Meadows is back after having a bit of a back issue towards the latter end of pre-season. Also along with Ben McNeil, who's a farmer busy with farm work and harvest, etc. Both of those will bring tempo and both quite dynamic, so they should get us going forward. Don Buckley will be starting at 10 again. I thought he controlled the game really well against Hawick, given that we were under a bit of pressure from the pack. Fortunately, Rory Marshall isn't available, but it gives us a great chance to see Lewis Walker at 13, who I think if we get the ball to him in space, then then we'll be able to do some damage. Lewis and Gregor aren't available this week either, but that gives the energetic, youthful pair of Lewis Elder and Owen Cranston chance to get on the field, and they'll join Robbie Shearer-Gibb in the back 3. Looking forward to the game again. 2 home games coming up, massively important to us to get the result that we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Thoughts on Jed Forrest then? Really crucial game.
Yeah, I never thought I'd see a day where Ross Nixon and Don Buckley would be lining up as 10s but it's great to see them do it. And I was listening to the coverage of the Hawick Jed game on the way up, and it was coming across like Don Buckley was playing very, very well at 10. He's a really good rugby player, all-round rugby player. He's played back row, he's played in the centre, and he can play at 10. He's an intelligent player. So, it's one of those difficult positions with Jed. When they lose a couple of players, obviously the youngs aren't there. When they lose a couple of players, it does sometimes become quite evident that they do have voids in their squad. But I think they certainly seem to be going on the right track, but in the Premiership, you don't get a lot of time to get on the track. You need to make sure that you pick up those points at home and away from home. You pick up any points you can, because it can become a bit of a dogfight if you leave it too late. But they'll be hoping that they can pick up some points. I think the shift across to 13 as well is an interesting move, because I've been very impressed with him in the 7s. I think if you can get him in some space, he's a good playmaker. He's got a good turn of pace as well. It'll just be defensively how that kind of pod operates, but he's good in the open channels. I think he'll be pretty good to watch at 13.
Well, Ewan Welsh will be covering that one for both Borders Rugby Radio and Borders Rugby Television. Well, also in the Premiership, a big game between Edinburgh Accies and Hawick at Rayburn Place, both unbeaten, and Accies destroyed the champions Mar in their last game, putting 50 points on the team from Fullerton. So that's going to be very, very interesting indeed. And here's what Hawick head coach Matty Douglas had to say.
We've had a decent start to the season, maybe not quite getting over the line against Selkirk, but a decent performance against Jed. Second half we didn't really get going, but looking into Saturday, Accies are they're a really good team. They've started the season well. Big win against Mar a couple of weeks ago. So the kind of challenge that we've put to the players this week is putting teams that are at the top of the table under real pressure at home and trying to grind out a result. I think last season we didn't win against any of the top 4 sides away from home, so that's the big test for us this week is putting an 80-minute performance away from home and putting them under pressure and just getting the little things right, stick to the things that work for us, and also making sure our set piece fires, and hopefully we can get on the right end of the result if all the things come together. And just quick update, looking at team selection, a few boys unavailable: Robbie Linton, Rune McLeod and Callum Rennick all away this weekend, so Nicky Little gets a start at tight head, so great to see Nicky getting a start for Hawick. Hugh Donaldson gets a run in the second row. Still a few boys out injured, but Hugh's performed well for the Force and moved up for the youth last year, so he gets a crack. And great to see Cian Riddle getting a run at 10 as well. Grant Huggan comes into the side and that moves Kirk to fullback, so we're looking pretty strong, and it's one we're looking forward to, and hopefully we can be on the right end of the result come Saturday night.
National 1 already covered Gala v Aberdeen. What about Kelso, though, at home to newcomers GHK? Here are the thoughts of Kelso Director of Rugby, Neil Hinnigan.
Yeah, we welcome GHK to Poynter Park on Saturday. A game we're really looking forward to, and we were expecting a very difficult game. GHK boasts some really good players like Craig Guzman and Tommy Spinks, Grant Anderson, guys like this that have been around the block a fair bit and played at the highest level, really, especially in club rugby, and some played a bit of pro as well. So these teams like GHK that have just came up from National 2 are certainly a force to be reckoned with, and it's one we won't be taking lightly. We think it could go to the wire, so we're going to have to be really up for it and expect an 80-minute performance to get the win. On selection front, pretty steady team. Obviously last week didn't get a game, so the team's not changed an awful lot, but one of the guys been away on holiday, Greg Punton, he steps out, and Liam Herdman returns to the Kelso side, which he's not featured in for 2 or 3 years. He's been down in Cardiff at Cardiff Uni, and he's returned home. He actually lives across the road from myself, so been in dialogue with Liam, and he's been back training for about a month now at the club. So yeah, he's had to wait a little bit to get in the side. He was meant to feature for the seconds last week against Jed, but obviously with that game being called off, he didn't get a run out. But things have worked in his favour for selection with Greg Punton being unavailable. So we'll see how that goes. And we're just going to go out and try and get 2 from 2 and build the season from there and see where it takes us.
Okay, that's Neil Hinnigan. Certainly not taking GHK for granted, and rightly so.
Yeah, they were really good in National 2 the year before. They had a couple of difficult battles against the likes of Peebles, who were in that league at the time, but yeah, they've got a lot of influence from their location, and I think the people involved in that club at GHK, obviously Tommy Spinks is one of the players that you mentioned, Peter Wright is still there. They've got a lot of ex-professional influence in that squad, so they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. But they started with a narrow defeat away to Stumel in their first game, so they'll be wanting to get a victory. Poynter, a difficult place to go for any team, but it's one of those environments. The likes of Peter Wright will he'll be able to have a positive influence on GHK, but Kelso are another team I probably the last couple of seasons I couldn't praise high enough in terms of the way that they play rugby and the way that their club has grown again. So it's going to be a difficult game, but Kelso, very well led, very well guided by their coaching staff and the players. And I don't think Greg Ponton's a good player, but I think they're a bit different to Jed. I think that they do have players that can rotate and come in, so that hopefully doesn't have too much of an impact on their overall squad. And
over 50 boys at training last time out. I mean, that's impressive, isn't it? And you only get that amount if there's a good attitude there. Yeah,
you only get that amount if people want to do it, and the people are not forced to go to rugby training and do it. And there's obviously an appetite and a hunger there, and they're fortunate as well that they have that pool of players that are wanting to come. But there's a youngster like Aaron Lunn. He's a Duns player. He's playing in the twos, but he's then moved to the town. And took a bit of time to come out of shell to go, look, I want to go and play. I spoke to him, he was an electrician at the college, so I kind of knew of his rugby background. And you see his name on team sheets now. So he's obviously, it's part of it. The clubs are community clubs, and Kelso are a club that do it probably as well as anybody, that they open up to say, look, come and play rugby with us, we'll look after you, you'll have fun. And, that's how these clubs should work. So it's great to see.
Well, the other National 1 game involving a border side, Melrose hosting Watsonians, both lost their first games of the season. Here's head coach Bert Grigg.
Yeah, looking forward to the game versus Watsonians this weekend. A few boys returning from injuries and unavailabilities last week with Ben McLean and Callum Cruikshank's been available in the forwards and unchanged in terms of our back line and our bench. So looking forward to what will be a tough encounter versus Watsonians. Both of us lost the first weekend of the season, so both of us will be going out for something to play, but boys have prepared well this week, and playing at home on the green yards I think will give us the edge, and boys will be coming out firing to make sure we get the win.
Okay, Melrose also without a win in their opener at Stirling 2 weeks ago, looking to step up against the team that lost to Gala.
Yeah, I think Melrose is a club that over the last few years has probably been a team that's been discussed quite a lot for various things because of the changes that Super 6 have brought around, and I feel that they've acclimatised quite quick after what was quite a difficult start. Obviously players like, say, Bruce Colvin and David Colvin, who did stick around, Richard Ferguson, who's now obviously retired, but these players did stick around and help kind of steady the ship, and I feel like some of the other teams have maybe not benefited off of that, and it allows Bert Grigg the opportunity to then grow his team and put his influence and his stamp on it. Obviously both got off to a difficult start, and Watsonians are always a difficult team, so it's going to be another interesting game. But Bert said it there, the influence and the background of playing at the green yards is something that all players like. It doesn't matter if you're from Melrose or not, so they'll be looking to that to have a positive impact on his team, and hopefully they can get their first win of the season.
Well, International League 2 and history will be made at Megatland. The first time Boroughmuir will play Berwick at senior level. Boroughmuir National 1 last year, Berwick National 3 last year, Berwick's first game this season. Here's one of the Berwick coaches, Paul Pringle.
The boys have put in a really good pre-season, and we've been working hard to keep the team sharp despite the unfortunate 3-week gap from our last pre-season game. Colin has challenged the lads with a lot of new things we want to bring into a game plan, and it'll be interesting to see how they implement it on Saturday. Numbers are strong at training. This has given us a few selection headaches, but in terms of team news this week, we are missing Darren Goodfellow, who's on holiday, and his brother Ryan, who unfortunately fractured his foot at training on Tuesday night. Missing in the backs is Rory Hindhoff, who is also on holiday. Rory has recently returned from a season playing for Musselburgh in Prem 1, which is a massive boost for us, and he's already having a positive impact in training. Cam Hill will start at hooker after his summer move from Duns, and he's already shown that he's fitting in well with the team and showing that the step up in level will not be a problem for him. Carl Gullen and Liam Robson will also get their league debuts after an impressive last season with their twos and a strong pre-season. All in all, we're expecting a tough game, but it's one we're really looking forward to.
Paul Pringle there, nicely prepared statement I think he was reading there. Can Berwick start off with a win? This is the big question.
I don't see why not. I think they've even though they were in a different league, like there was obviously a league sandwich between these two teams last year, it's amazing what a run of results and some positive results will do to a squad, and it's the exact same argument for Boroughmuir. They've obviously had a negative impact in their season last year, and that can still have a hangover when you move down a division. It's difficult when you go down the leagues because the things that you're maybe so structured. Boroughmuir are a very structured club, so when we're playing Super 6 and the whole fabric of that club, they play rugby very organised. Sometimes when you go down the leagues, that can be to your detriment, and if you play organised rugby, when you're brought into a bit of a dogfight and you play against players who play off the cuff and have got a bit of imagination, they can cancel each other out. So this is an interesting test for Berwick, because they're playing a club who have won the Premiership years ago. They've won Melrose Sevens years ago. They've got a lot of history, but I don't think you can gauge how successful Berwick will be off the back of this game, win or defeat. It's just one of those games that this league certainly has got to take a bit of time to pan out. But Berwick will be disappointed that they couldn't get their first game of the season. They couldn't get that obviously under their belt, but we'll just see how they go.
Well, Boroughmuir started off with a loss to Preston Lodge, quite heavily in fact, so Berwick will certainly be having a look at that one, but knowing Colin Young and the staff as well, they'll be taking nothing for granted. They'll play their own way and they'll try and beat them on their terms. Yeah,
I think Berwick have managed to turn around what was probably a slide down the leagues, and they've done well to do that, and I think people like Colin Young have stayed there for the test of time. He's been through the good things and the bad things, bringing Hindhoch back from Musselburgh as well is one of those things that, you know, he's a player that's went and tested himself. He's went away and he's had a shot and he's tried it and he wants to go back to his club, and I think that's excellent to see. It's not like you're failing or doing anything. You've tried it. Circumstances change, but he knows he can go back to his club and they welcome him back with open arms. Berwick are similar to Kelso. They're very, very good at welcoming their players back because they know that a lot of them get swallowed up by other clubs in Scotland.
Well, Hugh Brown will be at Meggetland covering that one for us. Now, Peebles, they've got a home match against Dumfries. Dumfries got a bit of a pasting on their first game of the season, but Peebles won against Cartha Queen's Park. That was at home. A man who's certainly enjoying life at the Guides at the moment is head coach Ian Chisholm.
Look at coaches, players, the club. We're looking forward to showing what we're about this weekend. After missing out on a fixture against Kirkcaldy last week, we were really excited to go up there. Felt we had a real opportunity to get a result. Looking at this weekend, Dumfries, you know, they've always been a big physical side, who've traditionally been really strong at home, and they'll look to have a go up front. They took a heavy defeat in their season opener against Falkirk, but I don't think we can read too much into that. There's loads of variables that could have played into that. We've had a good couple of weeks of training. Our running volume's been really high. We've been a wee bit more contact than we usually would, and we've just been nailing down our detail and our micro skills leading it if we can. But look, if we get our attitude and our effort levels right this weekend, I'm confident that we can put in a real positive performance, and if that happens, then the result will come. John Napier comes into the starting squad after he's been training really well, and he's not had an awful lot of game time on the games that we've had so far against Kelso in the Border League and Cartha at home. But when he has, he's impressed. Ryan McConnell, he comes into the starting lineup. John Gray make up our front row. Rowan McKeever comes into the starting lineup after training really, really well and having a few good showings, and Kenny Clyde comes into the starting squad as well, which means Cammy Pye moves to blindside flank, and he moved to 6, and Rob Harrison, who just a ball of energy, moves onto the open side with Roddy Guinea at number 8. Dave Collins and Donald Anderson keep their places at half-backs with James Dow, Buster Davidson and Hamish Barber in the back 3. Adam McDonald and Jack Harrison continue their partnership in the centres. We've got a really experienced bench with Willie Aitken, Andrew Brown and Ross Brown making up the forwards on our bench, with 17-year-old Frey McKeever coming in. We're excited to see what Frey could do. We very much thought it was horses for courses last week. He's got a really long range in his kicking game, and felt that with the weather and the type of team that Kirkcaldy were, that we'd be using him a lot. We expect the weather to be a wee bit better this coming weekend at the Guides, so he'll come onto the pitch and be able to show what he's all about as well. And look, he'll be covering anywhere from 10 to 15. So really excited about this weekend, and again another opportunity for us to stress test where we are. And I'm hoping that we are where we are, and I'm not wrong here.
Ian Chisholm, well, early days, of course, at Peebles, but he's certainly having an impact, and of course having 2 home games back to back, that's great for them.
Yeah, I think he is having an impact, and I'm gutted that I'm not able to play rugby under Ian Chisholm. I think he's got a great...
There's still time.
No, there's not. He's got a great way about him, great rugby knowledge. I think the guys are really buying into it, and I think that he's the one thing that Peebles have lacked for so many years, is actually having a rugby guy leading it and taking it by, you know, we had Gary Parker, who was a really good coach, and he motivated you, but you always felt that he wasn't fully invested. You know, I think that probably the last rugby guy we really had was Bruce McNaughton. He was great. His man management was sometimes questioned by some players, but you know, he really drew you in, and he taught you rugby. And I think sometimes that's lost with some clubs, mainly because of personnel. And I think Peebles are very, very fortunate to have Ian Chisholm as a head coach.
Peebles then at home to Dumfries. Now, 2 weeks ago we saw Hoyt Lindean's game called off due to the lack of a referee, and that brought things into sharp focus again, that this area and other areas are desperately short. So I invited the chairman of the Borders Referee Society, Stephen Turnbull, to come in and have a frank chat with me last week. Well, Stephen, the last time we spoke, you used the word crisis as a possible for the future. Would you say that we're now actually using that word crisis?
We've talked for many seasons, Stuart, about the precarious situation we're in with the availability of match officials in the Borders, and indeed across the whole country. And actually the last time we kind of talked about that word crisis, and we didn't think we were quite at that point, though we did have diminishing numbers. However, I would say quite candidly that we are at crisis level. We simply do not have enough match officials to service the game in the Borders. And I know it's a national issue. I know that other parts of Scotland are suffering, but it is an acute issue here in the Borders that we need to find a solution to pretty quickly.
How have we got to this situation?
I think there's a number of factors around. I think it's been happening over the course of a number of seasons that people are finding other avenues. For example, we've got players who are playing for longer or are going on to do other roles within clubs. We've also had COVID over the past, I would say, 2.5 years, which has exacerbated the issue because people have found other hobbies and things to do, and people have found that actually family life on a Saturday is probably more interesting now than refereeing. So there's a number of different factors that play into this. I think quite fundamentally, though, and something we probably haven't been as candid with, is that clubs haven't taken enough responsibility for supporting the development of referees or the pathways for referees and people moving into to match officiating across the Borders. And we've just sent out a letter to all clubs in the Borders asking them to take some personal responsibility to make sure that we can have referees available both in the immediate term but also the medium to longer term as well, so that we can continue to service the game down here in the Borders.
What can they actually do, the clubs themselves? What are you looking for them to do?
I think there's a number of steps that clubs can take, and clearly they can be supported by the Referees Society, who are responsible for allocating to the regional leagues and the under-18 leagues down here in the Borders. And of course, the national setup sits with the SRU in terms of National 1 down to National 3 and Premiership added into that as well. However, locally, what we're trying to encourage clubs to do is to have an appointed club referee. So in seasons gone by, the clubs were encouraged by the SRU, and indeed some funding came alongside that they had somebody allocated to the club in the event that they did not get a referee from the society. They could then cover that game. But also, actually, more simply than that, it's about identifying, for example, fringe players who are perhaps on the periphery of playing and perhaps are not making the first or second teams, that actually could step in and do at least 1 or 2 fixtures a month would help enormously. But also those who are coming towards the end of their playing career or trying to return through injury and going undertaking some conditioning. Actually, those are the kind of people that we need to encourage into the game, because they have the experience and the knowledge of the game inside out. And actually, if we reflect back from a refereeing perspective and what the players expect, they expect empathy, and those particular individuals can provide that and help facilitate the game on the park.
Of course, we must mention about the abuse which we've been trying to stamp out of the game as well. We know that everything's put in the programmes. There's notices saying it won't be tolerated. I've heard announcements at grounds that it won't be tolerated. And then about 10 minutes later, we hear some of the more vociferous people, giving it loudly with the referees. And that has, I know for a fact, led to a few referees giving it up.
I'd previously written out to clubs, and indeed it was probably towards the end of last season when we saw an increase on, I would say, passions returning from the absence of amateur rugby over the course of the COVID pandemic, and actually those passions probably spilling into something that constitutes more direct abuse towards match officials. So we have seen a rise in it. The SRU took action on the back of some complaints from referees themselves and did put out communications and directives from Gavin Scott at the SRU, which only goes so far. And actually, if I talk about responsibility on clubs in terms of referees and trying to provide referees, actually goes much broader than that. It's about creating that culture and atmosphere around the club that we expect everybody to see, and which encompasses everybody, including match officials, and it's quite an inclusive environment. So I guess we're seeing a rise of it. I think it's down to passion more than direct abuse. I think one of the issues is that clearly when clubs are perhaps on the receiving end of a defeat, for example, then tensions run higher, or indeed if they've been on the receiving end of some decisions that they perhaps don't agree with. But what I would say in all of that is that actually there's a balance between passion and abuse, and I think if people can remain passionate about the game, which is what we expect and want, but actually don't direct it towards the match officials. They're there to do a job. They referee what's in front of them. They have no preconceptions about what they're going into referee, nor do they have any grievances towards any clubs or players. So actually, nothing is deliberate. We're all human. Referees make mistakes, and we've, through Borders Rugby television and indeed radio, have highlighted some challenges of decisions that have perhaps been mistakes in games, and we've come out and admitted that, and on behalf of the referees and the clubs, we've tried to rectify that by explaining what the decision was. So I think if we can be proactive in explaining what we're trying to do from a referee's perspective, we then expect clubs to be inclusive and take account of the fact that referees, like everybody, like players who make a number of errors on the park and missing tackles or forward passes or knock-ons, referees are human and we make mistakes.
But of course, if there is abuse on the park, you can throw a yellow card at someone or a red card at someone, and that's dealt with there and then. But of course, you can't get to the back of the stand or whatever, where some of the spectators are in a free-for-all, basically. And the referee has a number of tools, if you just alluded to, if there is direct abuse, and we've seen this in seasons gone by, indeed the start of this season, that if a player directly abuses a match official or swears at them directly, then that will be a red card. Or indeed, if there is other behaviours around the park that are not conducive to the game of rugby or are not in the spirit of the sport, then we can yellow card people and send them to the sin bin. But you're absolutely right that we don't have control over spectators. So again, that's where the clubs come in. And that's where the clubs need to take responsibility. We can, of course, if there is abuse during the game by, for example, the coaching team, committee, or those close to the pitch, then we can submit to the SRU as officials a match official abuse form, and that's dealt with through the same disciplinary process as a red card, for example. However, again, I reiterate the point that we expect clubs to create the environment that we all want to see, and in particular, if we're trying to set an example for young people or children who are around the clubs, that is not shouting abuse at the referee, nor is it shouting abuse at players. And I've seen that particular example before. So I think we all just need to enjoy the fact that we're back to a full calendar of rugby, and indeed a very long calendar of rugby, but actually just enjoy it and embrace everybody for what they can offer to the game. Now, what's the latest on, say, National 1, 2 and 3? Because in previous seasons, pre-COVID, we had officials turning up at the National 1 as well. Then it was changed, wasn't it, so that each club in National 1 had to provide their own, touch judge rather than assistant referee, because they could only do so much effectively. And that was really, that came out of, again, a lack of referees. Where are we now as far as National 1 is concerned? So clearly in my role as president of the Referees Society, but also the president of the Scottish Rugby Referees Association, which is a collective body for all 6 referees society across the country, I have regular discussions with the SRU, and indeed my informal conversation with clubs highlights that assistant referees returning to National 1 in particular would be very beneficial. However, it comes down to the fundamental: there is just not enough officials. We have an assistant referee panel, we have referee panels nationally, and then we have a high performance setup. So all those different panels service everything from Super 6 right down to National 3. And whilst we manage to encourage more people who are perhaps not as agile or don't think they can last a full game of rugby to move into an assistant referee role, which in terms of the fitness and the agility is probably less intensive, we simply don't have that continuous supply coming through. And actually what we're noticing is we need a lot of those officials who are perhaps coming to the end of their career but can still service some of the local games across the country in terms of the regional setups. We need them to come back down and support that. So if we want to have a flow of match officials throughout the country and assistant referees, particularly at National 1, and we see the benefit of them at Premiership, and then we've got to have that supply coming through. And I think if we look at the role of an assistant referee, it does aid the referee on the pitch. I don't think they have as much of an influence as people perhaps on the touchline think, and they have primary duties, which of course, for those who don't know, is obviously the touch and go and then kicks at goal. But aside from that, they can add some support to the referee. For example, if you're slightly behind play and miss that forward pass or knock on, then they can help support that. But generally, in terms of the management of the game, and particularly around the breakdown and the ruck, we don't expect assistant referees to be inputting recommendations for decisions by the referees. So I think if we look at them as a whole, it's a really good development pathway for those who are moving into higher level games or perhaps falling out the higher level setup to gain more experience, but also just assist the referee as well in those particular areas. So what is the worst case scenario then if nothing happens between now and the end of the season? What's the situation there? And then let's flip it on its head and say, well, what are you looking for which could make things a lot better?
So I think the first thing is we've already seen a couple of games cancelled over the past couple of weekends. That trend will continue, and indeed I was just speaking to our allocation secretary, who does an unenviable task of trying to find referees week in, week out, and actually personally approaching people to try and get them to take on some responsibility. And looking at the next few weeks, I think we might cover this weekend but again, that's relying on support from other societies who are also struggling, and also relying on some of the clubs to try and provide somebody who is qualified to do games. But if I look at the next couple of weeks ahead, and indeed into October, there is no chance at this present moment that we will fulfil all the games. I think we have a core, and this is quite a staggering figure, of about 5 match officials in the Borders who referee week in, week out. And that doesn't take account of people's availability, which obviously for a number of reasons changes. So if I take that trajectory of those core match officials and the number of games we've got to fulfil, which probably on average is about 10, fluctuates, but it can go up to 16, then we're simply not going to cover games, and we can't rely on other referee societies who are experiencing similar issues to us to always plug the gaps. So I think the message is pretty clear now that we are at crisis level, and therefore we need clubs to take responsibility. And as I mentioned before, people who have gone through a referee course previously, and there's I would say hundreds of them across clubs in the Borders. Actually, we need them to step up and start taking on some responsibility to referee games. And as a society, we've already put out a call to all of these clubs to say that we will support them through that process, and we will do refresher training for all these officials, and we'll do reflections and preparation for games. So actually, I reiterate that message that if we continue with the trajectory, we simply won't fulfil all the games, and games will have to be cancelled.
Or switch to Friday nights, Sundays?
Switching games does help. Again, I go back to the point about availability, that people are sometimes not available on a Saturday for a variety of reasons. However, we also switching to Friday or Sunday does then often mean, for example, I did 2 games this weekend past, and that level of commitment from our small group of match officials is probably not sustainable, nor does it give us resilience, because like players, referees do pick up injuries or niggles throughout the season. So I think switching to different days definitely does help in the short term, where we have that commitment to do, for an official to do 2 fixtures, or indeed those who are not available on a Saturday can do other days. But it's certainly not a medium to long term fix going forward.
Okay, well, it's a gloomy picture, but hopefully with this interview here that you've raised awareness again of a critical situation, and hopefully we'll get people, particularly ex-players, coming forward.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time.
Okay, that was Stephen Turnbull talking to me last week. Worrying times, and it's not as if we weren't warned about this.
Yeah, I think it's been something that's been happening for a while. And I'm a bit of a hypocrite, because David Changling asked me when I retired, and I was 23, 24 at the time. He asked me about refereeing, and I think at the time I probably just wanted a bit of distance from the game, and I wanted away. I didn't word it so politely at the time when I was speaking to David Changling, but I did say I wasn't interested in refereeing, and I think in hindsight, I probably could have done something, but I never. I've done something else which I'm happier with, and it really did fill the rugby void that I had in terms of doing the radio and doing punditry. It's been great. I've absolutely loved it. But for some people, that rugby scratch might be itched by refereeing. You see people like Andrew Skeen getting involved. There's loads of players. I think it is sometimes when I go back to my club at Peebles, and you do see some of the referees, it's still the same faces that I seen when I retired. What's that? Just about a decade ago. So it is worrying. So it's the same thing that's been batted about for a good 10 years since I've stopped playing, because I've been in these discussions. But it's something else maybe needs to happen, a new venture, something different to allow this. I think the idea of games on different days is probably a quick fix, but it only papers over the cracks until more faces show up and want to take on refereeing.
Well, let's get back to matters on the pitch and into the East Leagues. Duns are at home to North Berwick in Division 1. While in the second division, no game for Langham, but Hoytlandine take on Livingston at Volunteer Park. In Division 3, it's a derby at Netherdale, back pitches between Galloway and Erston, that game kicking off at 2:30. Both, of course, desperate to win, and some silverware on the line as well. You can hear what it means to both teams, starting with Earlston's Aaron Patterson.
As you know, we have Galloway on Saturday. It's a border derby. Everybody knows what that means. Everybody's up for it. Everybody's excited. It's enjoyable to be a part of. Us lads know that individually, if we all step up, there's no reason we can't walk away with a win this weekend and get ourselves moving in the right direction for the rest of the season. Last weekend we obviously didn't have a game. The weekend before that we lost 27-5 to Inverleith. There was a lot of positives to take for that, a lot of things that we certainly need to work on. We've discussed all those. They're going to be in the forefront of our mind for this Gala game and for the rest of the season, making sure we're ironing out those wee mistakes, those wee things that cost quite dearly when you're playing the game of rugby. However, saying that, as I say, all the lads are up for it. Can't wait to hopefully walk away with the first win of our season and the cup itself.
And from a Galloway perspective, it's head coach Stuart Walker.
It was a tough day in our first league game away to Lismore a couple of weeks ago now, and we didn't quite put things together like we'd hoped to. Lismore were strong, and some of our less experienced boys struggled a little bit against that. You know, a couple of weeks to regroup, and training's been going really well. We've got a few boys coming back into the squad on Saturday, which will make a huge difference. You know, playing Earlston is always going to be a tough game, border derby, and we've been really excited about it. And as I say, preparation's been good, and we're ready for our first home game of the season and looking forward to it.
Stuart Walker there, and this one's going to be competitive, and it might well be East League 3, sort of the lower rung, but you can hear in the voices there, this means a lot to them. Yeah, definitely. It's still a border derby, and you can hear it from both the guys there that they've got a lot of pride to play for, and I think that's, adds to the mix. I think every level of rugby, it doesn't matter if it's Premiership or if it's Nat 3 or if it's regional rugby, it's still a game of rugby. These guys are still going out there, there's a lot of pride at stake, there's, they want to enjoy themselves, which is the main thing. And I think even though if you're an elite athlete, you're doing it because you enjoy it, you work because you enjoy it, and if you've got your hobby, you've certainly got to enjoy it. And that's what these players are going out there to do. They want to, have that competitive edge. They want to get their upper hand on their opposite man, but they also want to enjoy it. And sometimes that level of rugby is probably the purest and the best, because they can, as soon as it's finished, beers in the club rooms, there's probably more social in that level of rugby than there is in some of the upper reaches of national rugby. So, everybody's it's certainly got a place everywhere, but it's going to be an interesting game. And, Stuart Walker, who's the Galloway coach, he's had a lot of experience with Edinburgh Accies. Used to play against them a lot in youth rugby, actually. So now I know the face to the name. It's, he's certainly a good rugby player. So hopefully he brings, another external influence into that level of rugby at Galloway. OK, and in the final Division 3 game, it's Hoyt Quins. Long-awaited return after a year off. They visit Lismore. And just before the programme, I caught up with Captain Adam Hall. This is obviously the big moment for Hoyt Harlequins, because this is your first match since the return, as far as the league's concerned.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's been a lot of hard work to get a team on the pitch, but we're looking forward to Saturday. What's it been like getting the Quins back again? It's been a real lot of hard work. I think a lot of the committee and players have been doing a lot of phoning, knocking on doors, speaking to people to try and get this back up and running again. But we've been quite flexible with players with regards to training and availability, and a lot of guys have came back in the notion that they can play when it suits them, and I think that suits us as well. As long as we're getting 15 players on the pitch on a Saturday, we're quite happy. And this obviously is the first one. It's quite a long season ahead. Are you confident you're going to fulfil everything? I think so. I think, yeah, the first week, unfortunately, we had to call off against Trinity because we had a spate of unavailabilities, a few injuries, people on holiday, work commitments. But I think now we're into the middle of September and people's commitments, there's no golf and things like that. I think we're quite confident that we're going to get a team week in, week out this year.
What you were mentioning about the Trinity Accies game and being deducted, of course, that this has happened a lot over the last few years. It's a rule which is controversial because it kind of penalises clubs that are trying their best to get people on the pitch, and sometimes through no fault of their own, they're penalised, and that has another knock-on effect. What's your own thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's quite disappointing that we've been docked points just for one unfulfillment, but arguably it does kind of set a precedence, and people could pull out if they maybe didn't think they had a good team and so on. But maybe at the lower end of the structure, it's a rule that's definitely worth looking at.
Well, we certainly wish you well. It's great for history as well for the club, because a lot of people were looking at the decision, over 12 months ago and thinking, well, we might never see the Quins back again. But luckily, you've bucked the trend, and let's hope that it's the start of a very worthwhile and long campaign for you.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks, Stuart.
That was Adam Hall from Hoyt Quins. We wish them all the best in their first game of the season, the first game that they've played for a long time. Well, on Sunday, a new-look Kelso ladies take to the pitch for the first time in the Caledonian Midland East League, and they begin with a long trip to Dundee to take on the Dundee Valkyries. I hope I've pronounced that right. Not really a Wagner fan, me. Earlier, though, I spoke with Captain Donna Borthwick.
Pre-season's been good. It's been a normal pre-season. It's been hard going at times. The coaches have run us around a lot. We've had a lot of new people coming along during the time as well.
What's the kind of spread compared with last year when you had quite a few numbers?
This year we've got 32 players registered. 10 of those players that'll be their first season with us. And this Sunday we've got 8 new players.
Last year you were in the National League. You had to withdraw from that after a while, but not before we filmed you actually winning a game quite convincingly and putting a few tries on the board as well, which was very, very encouraging. But as a club, you've decided to drop down to kind of regional rugby, and that must be something which you're going to be targeting to eventually, maybe after a couple of years, get back into the national scene again.
Yeah, the reason why we dropped down was basically because we lost a lot of players during COVID, and then we ended up getting a lot of new players in. So we felt like that the new players would benefit better by dropping down, and then eventually in a couple of years' time we do want to go for promotion again.
Because you were very competitive, certainly in the games I watched.
Yeah, definitely. We were really competitive and we had a lot of good wins and we won a couple titles. So we're hoping to do that again this season.
So how far down the road are we now in terms of women's rugby? Not just Kelso ladies, but how far down the road are we from, getting a few local derbies? I mean, we hear about Melrose Ladies, Gala Vixens, and Hoyk have girls coming along as well. We're seeing more and more women and girls who want to take part and play rugby. Where are we in the big picture locally?
For Kelso, it's brilliant to see all these new places popping up with women's teams, because that's exactly what we want. We want to have like a Borders derby going on.
Well, we're certainly looking forward to coming back to Poynter Park to see you perform on a Sunday in the near future. But of course, you kick off your season this coming Sunday. It's a long old trek down to Dundee to play the Dundee Valkyries. What do you know about them?
Yeah, it's the longest trip we're going to have to make this season. We're excited to see what they've got to offer and to see what we can offer with all our new players and our new team.
I was going to say, what is the team news for Sunday?
We've got new coaches, so Ailey Walker and Alan Frame are our new coaches, so that's exciting. We've got 17, I think, players playing this Sunday, so it's exciting. There's 8 of them that it's their first game. I think the older players, the more experienced players, are looking forward to taking more of a leadership role and helping out the newer players that are coming through, because we're always welcome new players. So it is good to see them along. But it's a long trip for them for their first time out.
If people are interested in taking part and want to join Kelso Ladies, what do they have to do?
We train every Wednesday and Friday. Sometimes the location changes, so it's either Croft Park or down at Poynter Park. But they're best to just follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Send us a message. We'll get back to them.
We wish you all the best for the season, and obviously on Sunday, that long trip to Dundee, and we'll catch up with you when you're back down in Kelso again.
Yeah, our first home game is the first weekend in October.
And we'll be there for that one. Donna Borthwick, captain of the Kelso Ladies. Well, finally, just talking of women's rugby, congratulations to all selected for the Scotland Women's World Cup squad, including, of course, Lisa Thompson, Chloe Rowley and Lana Skeldon representing the Borders.
Yeah, I think it's good to have that inclusion, because it's something that's perhaps it gets lost amongst the more traditional men's game. It's going to have to take time to really grow and get the attraction from younger females who want to play rugby. But it does seem to be becoming a lot more attractive. You see the teams likes of Watsonians and Hillhead, they've got a long tradition of female success at that game, perhaps a bit too much because of the lack of competition elsewhere. But from a Borders point of view, it's great to see some familiar names and some familiar faces there in the squad, and it'll just be a matter of time before it has that similar surge, or hopefully it's a matter of time before it has that similar surge to like what women's football's had. But time will tell. But well done to the three that got into the squad.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for today. My thanks to Dale Clancy. Do join us live for Borders Rugby Special tomorrow at 2 o'clock for 3 hours of rugby from Netherdale. It's Gala against Aberdeen Grammar in National 1. We'll be back next Friday for our Friday rugby preview, but for now, from me, Stuart Cameron, and Dale Clancy, bye for now.